Some people see population ethics questions as just questions about procreation, about whether people decide to have children, how many children they decide to have. For other people, population ethics is not about the process of having children, it's about the end result, about the population that we create, how many people are alive at any one time, how we distribute resources between them, and whether people are happy or not.
The current projection is for around 9.5 billion people by mid-century and over 11 billion by 2100. So if that projection is accurate, and that's even based on very optimistic assumptions about fertility decline converging worldwide to replacement level. So even then we're looking at a world which has enormously more people than we have today.
At the same time as population growth has increased, our technological ability has increased at the same pace or even higher pace. So for a while this more Malthusian mechanism has been true for most of human history, at this current time point it seems that the technological growth rate, probably for the first time in history, actually increased at a similar pace.
Trying to say, we'll come up with a technological solution as an excuse for doing nothing about population growth, it's about tolerating population growth risk. And why should we tolerate population growth? This is massive. And then that reverts back to, because trying to meddle with people's decisions in family making would be a massive harm. It probably will be a harm to some people. To other people, reproductive autonomy is not as important. But to some it can be really important. But is it so important that it justifies tolerating the risks?
In Africa, we see numbers differently. For us, numbers is good. The bigger the number, the better it is.
There is a real tension between reproductive rights, which is supposed to trump everything else, and the rights of future people to inherit a reasonable Earth system.
There's very much a wrong way to talk about population, I think, and that would be a way that kind of isolates it from questions of global justice and says, well, this is a population, this population issue is something that we need to focus on its own, and then you have a danger of starting to incentivize policies that say, well, birth rates are highest in the developing world, it's their problem, they've got to sort it out, and I think that would very much be the wrong way to look at it. It would be completely unjustifiable given that the high per capita consumption in the developed world is very much what has been causing environmental problems so far, and it also has very dangerous implications.
The Easterlin paradox, which suggests that for the last 60 years since we've been collecting data on life satisfaction, people in the Western world haven't got any more satisfied with their lives. And that seems really surprising to us, but it seems like the explanation is that as we've developed more and more, we've just changed our standards. So remember, in the last 50 years, we're richer, we're healthier, we live longer, we're safer, we have Justin Bieber, we have all of these improvements to our lives, but yet people don't seem to register any increased life satisfaction.
There's been a particular, and I think absolutely right, focus on maternal and child mortality. And that's linked in to concepts of global health and well-being. And I think there's a very strong body of support across all the political parties that want to see more action and to push for our international development efforts to specifically focus on that.
Some people would say that, just thinking about age discrimination is dangerous in itself, right? A lot of people think that, that's something that we should avoid. But of course, as resources get scarcer and, there's healthcare systems are under pressure everywhere, one of the things that you might say is that, we might have good ethical reasons to put limits on treatments by age.
I think we shouldn't rule out the ideas of social disapproval if we feel that we need to be contained in our reproductive habits. Now, I don't want that sounds really bizarre, but we give up our rights for environmental purposes. We can't smoke in public these days. Now, to a smoker, his right has been denied. He has to go out. But we feel that the right to have a airspace which is unpolluted of cigarette smoke trumps. We have compulsory vaccination against communicable diseases. Again, that's a cost, and somebody might say it's a violation of my right. Somebody's vaccinating me. Why? Suppose I don't want to be vaccinated.
When you consider the risks of overpopulation, there's probably a duty to act.
If you want to suggest any strategy, you really need to understand the people, as an insider. So that if you bring your whole, let's say, family planning methods and all that, it might not really work because our understanding is totally different. We need more people.
It's not a disagreement about facts necessarily, but a disagreement about values to a certain extent, because you can accept that we ought to do something about population, but you may think that this translates into different duties for different people or different nations, depending on their history and their current trends and makeup.
Migration, by and large, didn't really come into it, but as we've seen over the past 20, particularly the past 15 years, it's come to virtually dominate the discussion on population.
One of the things which stands out most strongly is people's ability to adapt to the circumstances they find themselves in. So there seems to be this worry sitting in the background with population ethics of we create too many people and then we'll run out of water and land and oil and it'll make us miserable. And I'm not sure I buy any of these kind of resource-based concerns, or at least it's really not clear what the argument is.
Generally speaking, migrants have a higher level of fertility than the non-migrant resident population. And that's particularly seems to be so with this new wave of migrants. So it's affecting the recipient countries, not just simply by the numbers of incomers, but also the fact that pretty soon after they move in, they start to have their own families. And the fertility levels are, at least at the moment, higher.
Overpopulation is a process, the pattern is it's about population momentum as well. And once you have a resource shortage because you have too many people or because you've run out of resources, whatever, if you could have resolved this by having fewer people, you're perhaps 100 years late, because it takes a very long time to reverse population growth.
Now you have this sort of unparalleled state in human history where you have societies with very many old people, right? In fact, there are a handful of societies already where traditionally it's the older generation that helps the younger generations. And for the first time in history, we already have a handful of societies where it's the younger generation together that helps the older. So the flow of aid and resources had turned around. And I think it's needless to say that this is going to cause a lot of conflict.
The UN talks about reproductive rights. It's the right to family planning. And that's, to be sure, is the right thing to do. As a minimum, women should have the access to family planning, modern family contraception, and reproductive health facilities. That's for sure. But the way reproductive rights have been defined allows for the family planning agency to help people realize their extremely high fertility desires.
So policies to do global justice are going to include things like empowering women, availability of contraception, the kind of social security that means people actually have a genuine option to decide to have fewer children. But beyond those kind of policies, you have the question of, well, should we be looking at incentive-based policies to try and encourage reduction in birth rates? And there I think we do face some morally difficult choices.
Worrying about overpopulation doesn't mean using coercive population control measures. There are a whole raft of policies we can look at, using welfare incentives, education, all sorts of standard things that to do with behaviour modification that liberal democracies use all the time for other purposes. I think in the developed world we should really stop the pronatalist policies which are now being adopted in order to tackle population ageing.
There have to be measures to mitigate population growth in a lot of the world, and that go much further than just trying to change people's minds, and that could be incentives, it could be disincentives, but it could also be compelled use of contraception, and that feels really terrible. But it feels even more terrible to knowingly allow an enormous number of children to come into harm.
Nobody seems to be obviously wrong, and we ought to accept different opinions. How do we deal with this uncertainty? How do we make moral decisions in the face of this moral uncertainty?
Trying to construct better value structures, better moral systems is something that population ethicists are very much involved in. We're kind of at the coalface of unearthing new ways of thinking about morality.